Yo, what it is, everybody? Thanks for tuning back into another episode here on the Speedbug channel. Today we are talking about these two monsters right here. And I know I'm gonna get ripped apart in the comments on this one, but you know what? Keeping it real and 100 with you guys. So the day has finally come and the BMW has been unlocked. And I have been able to experiment with the race modes and the Race Pro 1, 2, 3 and figure out the power modes, and now feel the more power and the power that this bike actually creates. Check out its shift cam technology and everything else under the sun. And of course, you know I'm going to compare it to the mighty Gsxr over there. And we're going to use this bike, the way that it is stocker, against even comparing it two ways, against the modded Gsxr and the stock Gsxr. So I know this is the holy grail question, and what are y'all willing to want to know? Is the BMW faster than the Gsxr? Well, I'll tell you this right now, stock for stock, the Gsxr is quicker. No question about it. No question about it. Now, before you want to rip me apart and do all this, that, whatever, I have the stuff to prove it too. Now, against the modded Gsxr, I'm going to tell you this right now, it's going to come down to a rider's race. Now, first, let me add in, this is just talking about in a straight line here. This is talking about in a straight line. And I want to say this because I've really had a good chance now to rip on this thing. And more videos about like the top speed and everything coming out that real soon. So hear me out, because these bikes accelerate completely differently, and the way they gain speed is completely different. And you'll understand exactly the why and where I say this, because the BMW is faster than the Gsxr in certain ways. Now, before you people say, oh, well, this bike, check out 650, check out this, check out that, whatever. A dyno is nothing but a tuning tool. It doesn't matter how much horsepower it makes. Horsepower, remember, is the amount and the number. It's a calculation, a man-made up number. How long can you actually create torque? That's what horsepower is, because torque is a measurable force. So straight off the bat, we already know the Gsxr makes more torque and than the BMW. Now, here's before you guys, go off and say that you're wrong. You need to check this out. You need to check that out. So there is the video of this coming on the dyno soon, which I will show you this and show you that and everything like that. That is coming soon, and I will back it all up. But it's not going to be in this video. But what I can tell you is from when I had this tune. So let's back up a little bit. Let's go stock for stock, because that bike's pretty restricted stock. This one, yes, it's restricted, but not as much as the Gsxr. So hitting and going, we're going to both start off slow. Still, the Gsxr makes more torque and has more grunt down low and makes a lot more torque, and then starts to taper off a little bit at the top, kind of like a roots blower or kind of like an old muscle car, where the BMW doesn't make that torque like the Gsxr does, or a roots blower. It's kind of more like a centrifugal supercharger, and then the faster you spin it, the more power it's going to make. So the way that the power is delivered and what you're going to be utilizing is really going to depend on what the application is. One is not better than the other. It's really going to depend on the application. So stock for stock up top, I'll tell you this right now, hands down, the BMW has got it straight up. We're talking like unflashed Gsxr, no mods or anything like that. Now, I know what my last BMW did and everything like that, and my last BMW made more power than the Gsxr up top, but it still never had anything in the mid-range and the low end to keep up with this bike. And as you saw, that other BMW, that 2018 that I built here on the channel, it was like a 4 or 5 episode part. His bike made 203 wheel and made just a little bit more power than the Gsxr did. We had them tuned and everything on the exact same dyno. For you dyno people want to say, oh, everything was different. Exact same dyno. And correction factor was exactly the same. Whether it's STD or SAE, it doesn't matter. It's the gain that tells you the difference. The gain is still going to be the same between the two from the before and after. If you don't believe me, look it up. You'll see exactly what I mean with the differences and how it actually calculates. But that's another story to go into the difference between STD and SAE and the difference between Mustang dyno, dynamometer, dyno jets, you know, all that stuff. Like, I'm not going into that right now. But the BMW, this bike made way more torque. And now when I modded my BMW, that made well over 200 horsepower. It even made well over that 203 mark. However, it did not make the torque that this thing did. Now, when I took it, and I remember when I dynoed it when it was bone stock, it was in the mid 70s, and I think at the end I gained like 1 or 2 foot-pounds of torque through the whole thing, and I have to look back to check the graph if I can remember off the top. But I know it was over the 200 horsepower mark, and I did many videos on that as well. The Gsxr came right under the 200 mark, but this thing damn near made 87 foot-pounds of torque at the rear tire. Now, why I'm kind of telling you this, and that just didn't make it real quick and taper off. It was a very up and then obviously down with the intake runners, and then back up and held it. And then, of course, as it gets to like the top to 10, 12,000, then, of course, it starts to dip off where horsepower is going to start to take over. This thing right here only makes 83 foot-pounds of torque. The shift cam bike makes only 83 foot-pounds of torque at the crankshaft. So if I had to guesstimate or anything like that, it's probably making somewhere between 75, 77 wheel at best. Let's factor in 10%. Some people factor in 20. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt, 10. So 8.3. So you're like at 75 or anything like that. Now, when I rode it, and the first impression was it unlocked through the RPM band, I'm like, man, this thing's kind of a dog. It's really nothing, anything. It really doesn't do it. I was really expecting that shift cam technology to really take place, and it didn't. So it got past 8, you know, past 10. It had its little dips and stuff like that, which I've seen on many dyno graphs and things like that. Again, not focusing on the number, focusing on the graph. And then once it got to that 12,000 mark, this thing became alive, hitting like a shot of nitrous. Now, the extended lift and duration that is obviously on this the shift cam technology, because it's not the same variable cam timing that's in this bike as it is on this bike. This is a mechanical one. Yes, this is still mechanical, but this one moves the cam gear in advance and retard position, where this one actually has a bigger cam lobe, very similar to like VTEC when it initiates off of RPM and oil pressure and a couple other things to move the cam to give it some more lift and duration. So when it got to that 12,000 mark and took it all the way 14 and 14 plus, it was like, holy crap, this thing's really started to move. And I was in third gear, and I was like, man, the front tire's coming up. I'm like, the horsepower is, it's really there. And they say a thing makes, I believe it was max torque at like 11,000 or something RPM. So it really makes sense why it was starting to bob and weave up. And I'm like, making love here with the gas tank to try and keep this joker down. I'm like, holy crap. And I had to slow down a little bit and tighten my steering dampener because the damn handlebars kept bobbing and weaving a lot. I was like, it was hopping. So I'm like, okay, fantastic, good job. Now, the engine and stuff is getting acclimated to now that it's officially being unlocked. However, you could definitely tell this bike is more race-inspired and definitely more tuned for the higher RPM. Hands down, 100%. Does it have more torque? Here's something I do want to cover. Does it have more torque than the outgoing model? Absolutely, yes, it does. It does make a difference, but that in the shift cam technology, it does come in. It doesn't come in all the way at the top. It does come in a little down low. But does it make a huge difference to the point where it's like, oh my God, I have to get it, and it's like a whole new bike and the holy grail bike? Well, I will have to tell you this. The answer is no. Riding around on the street like that, it makes a difference. You could tell it's a difference. It's like an evolution of the next bike of having a little bit more power. But it's definitely not like jumping off of a bike with no torque, like a 600, and then you jump onto a 1000 and you feel a lot of torque. That's what it's like jumping from this to riding that when down low on the street, because the torque curve starts so low and is so broad through the RPM. Now, I will tell you this. Even with this modded Gsxr, before you guys sit here and say that I'm beating so much on my bike, oh, look, damn it, it's my bike, and I'm going to keep it real, because if I don't like it, I'm going to tell you. I will tell you this. Riding around and everything down low with this bike, that's great, and it's fun, as I've mentioned many times on the city, but even with this bike, with the stock muffler, as you see, it's got the stock muffler, stock secondary cats, the resonator box, and everything is still stock on it. That bike, right now, where this is bone stock, I know will pull away from this BMW. Give this thing a little bit of de-restriction, like give it a nice free-flowing exhaust. I don't believe in, the ECU flashes and stuff like that, so we'll just, adjust the fuel curve with like a power commander or something, and, nice filter and stuff like that. Really free up some horsepower and optimize this thing because it does run lean from the factory. I have no doubt in my mind this thing could pick up, maybe somewhere between 5 and 15 horsepower up top on the dyno. Down low and anything like that, you may lose a foot-pound of torque really down low because you would have no more back pressure. But during the middle and, of course, the higher RPM, again, with the shift cam helping, I really do think it's going to make a difference. And it's really going to come down, again, to, you say a modded bike versus a modded bike. Whoever screws up is winning. But I still think this bike, just as my last one, just up top, has a little bit more even still than this bike, absolutely 100%. As far as leaning and dipping and stuff down into the turns, well, hey, that's another video, that's another story. We're just talking about straight line performance here. And I've raced other BMWs, and my other buddy's bike that made 203, 204s to the tire. We start down low, 20, 30, 40 miles an hour. It doesn't matter if it's first, second, third gear. This bike gets out 5 or 6 bikes on him every single time, no matter what. I can even start in third gear. He could start in second, and this bike will still pull out 4 or 5 bikes because of the amount of torque, as long as it doesn't wheelie. Now, if we take this bike in the BMW, the 2018, and we start this joker at the race at 100, now the race is definitely more even, and now it really becomes to like a rider's match. And that's how I really do believe with this bike. This bike is, yes, you could tell it's much lighter. It's definitely more flickable, due to the carbon fiber wheels, the notching out of the frame where they shaved weights in the engine and all that stuff as a whole package, not just the wheels. As a whole package. You can definitely really tell it is lighter. Does it feel much lighter than the Gsxr? A little bit. Does it feel much lighter than the outgoing model? Absolutely. And that's where it really shines in the turns. But by making all that extra power up top, I could see where they really race inspired. It's very similar to my R1M. When you're on the track and stuff like that, you can be at 10,000, 11,000 RPM where you're coming out of a sweeper, dragging some knees, and then hurry up and take off and twist the throttle all the way back. And this sucker is, it's going to need every bit of probably the wheelie control just to keep your ass on the ground. However, the downfall to that, it makes a lot of freaking power up top, and I got to give kudos to BMW. They did a fantastic job with it. But are you really going to always be riding this thing above 10,000 RPM on the street? And the answer is no. So down low still, even when I mod this thing, again, it's going to be greater. It's going to be faster than what it is now. The win still goes right now to the overall fun bike on the street is the Gsxr, simply because of the torque and how much fun you could have it. Not saying that you can't do any wheelies or anything like that, but I have to work a hell of a lot harder to get this bike up in second gear on the street, anything below 10,000 RPM. Not saying that it won't come up, but it's pretty tough to even do on this bike. Below 10,000, 9,000 RPM, second gear, especially without using the clutch, it's almost damn near impossible. But on the Gsxr, you can damn near do it, in any gear, from 4,000 RPM on. It just makes that torque. But again, 2 completely different bikes, and the way they deliver the power. I know I've been ripped apart on this before, saying, "Oh, you're just a Suzuki lover and a Suzuki favor and stuff like that." Again, if that was the case, I wouldn't have spent all this money brand new on this bike if I really didn't like it. That's 100%. I will also note this for the ones that don't want to say that the gearing is definitely shorter and closer on the Gsxr, so that definitely also does help with the torque delivery. This bike definitely has gearing that's a little bit more spaced out, and it is taller. But the Gsxr still hands down 100%. I was hoping to have, with this new BMW shift cam technology, to have kind of torque like that. But when the Gsxr still makes more rear wheel torque than this bike did, hell, even at the crank, it's really just no competition. But who knows? We'll see what happens with the new mods and stuff that come out. for this bike, and I really think that people are really going to improve on this bike a little bit more than the outgoing model, but it's going to take some time. You know, it's only a couple weeks old. A lot of people still haven't got theirs, but the torque is a big thing to me, and it really makes the crotch rockets fun, because a high revving engine is great when you're on the racetrack, but when you do primarily ride these bikes and stuff on the street, torque tends to be fun. And another bike that does compete with the Gsxr as far as torque, is, I gotta say it, is definitely, that's not a Suzuki, is the ZX10RR. It's great, but it still doesn't have the Gsxr torque. But again, they all can't be winners, but don't get it twisted now. I'm sure, you know, Kawasaki and Honda are coming up with their own shit sooner than later, probably I'd say within the next year, with all these bikes having, you know, variable cam timing and valve timing and stuff like that. And I'm sure some of them, you know, again, excuse me if I'm missing one, that's not going to come out with full direct injection, or hell, even maybe a camless engine, like, you know, Koenigsegg has said for a good amount of time. But we're going to put this thing on the dyno, and I would probably say in stock form, I have no question, this thing is probably going to make the same power, if not more. It's a horsepower than my Gsxr. I have no doubts. And my last black one pretty much did. I think in stock trim it made like 196 or 197 horsepower in bone stock trim, and obviously after all the work and stuff like that, it made well over into the 200s. So this one's going to probably be right there. If I had to guesstimate, probably right around 200 or so, maybe, you know, 202, 203. But the torque is definitely, it's there over the old one. It's going to definitely be in the 70s, you know, for sure. Maybe real low 80s. But it's definitely not going to beat this Joker for sure in torque. But that's why I kind of still really like riding this bike and dicking around a lot on the street, because the torque, it's just fun. And you know, when you can clutch, you know, third gear when you're sitting on the expressway, when, you know, when no one's around, and pop this thing up and ride it and go fourth and just cruise comfortably at 100+ miles an hour, but it comes up like butter. This one you really do have to work to get it up. So they're just different bikes. I still, you know, the completely different bikes. It's, you know, yin and yang, and that's what I also really do like about them being so different. I wouldn't really want two of the exact same bikes. But dyno vid coming up with that. Top speed is fantastic. I have gotten really close to actually 200 on this thing, and for a stock can with the mirrors and everything like that, it definitely scoots. It's definitely no slouch. So if you see one on the street and you decide to race one, when it gets up growing in those higher PMs, make sure you're not sleeping, because it pulls really hard, and the pulls are really long, and with its taller gearing, it does work, and it does do great things. But we're at 18 minutes on this video, but that's going to wrap it up here for today. I hope you guys like what you saw. More Facebook, Instagram, at the Speedbug, same name here as YouTube. Drop your comments below. Love, hate. I love all y'all. Hate all y'all the same. And we'll see you here for another episode here on the Speedbug channel. Deuces.